double R beats on the instrumental.
Welcome back, everyone, to 40 Ounce Hip Hop. Really excited for today's episode. After last week doing the honorable mentions, this week we can finally dive into that top 20. And today's just a really fun group of albums to talk about. We got the very influential Lonely Stoner that everybody loves, along with one of his greatest influences. And then to finish off the episode, we got an underground legend teaming up with his favorite producer and coming back with another classic.
And now that we got that out the way, I hope everyone got their 40s, maybe even a couple shorties with them, because we about to pour up.
All right, so first off on our list, number 20, we have Man on the Moon 2 by Kid Cudi. Full name of the album, Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager. Obviously a sequel to his debut album, Man on the Moon, End of the Day. And then before that, he had his mixtape. That was his first major project, A Kid Named Cudi. Full name, Scott Mescudi, or Mescudi. I've heard it pronounced different ways.
He's pronounced it Mescudi on, I believe...
Ghost.
Yes.
Yeah, on Ghost. So I've always said Scott Mescudi.
Yeah.
Even though Cudi, it's like
yeah,
Scott
I thought Mescudi
yeah,
for the longest time.
But yeah, Scott Ramon Seguro Mescudi. Right now he's 36 years old, but of course this album is 10 years old now. It came out on November 9th, 2010. So at this point he was just a young 26-year-old. He was still a kid. He was still Kid Cudi, right?
Yeah, you're still a kid. Like, I think for us personally, it's like, I think in this day and age, especially now with how kind of life's going, transitioning, longer lifespans and whatnot, 26 ain't too old. You can still call it. Lil Wayne could be still a Lil Wayne. You can still have a kid.
Yeah, Young Jeezy finally changed his name.
Yeah,
though,
to just
right?
Jeezy.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we could consider Kid Cudi Kid Cudi still. But I think with this album, what makes it a classic and what earned it a spot on this list is this overall incorporation of and like tackling of its themes. And some of the major themes of this project are honestly isolation, addiction, and introspection, really. And introspection in a form that is exploring mental health and mental illnesses like depression and self-destructive behavior, really.
Yeah, like he's had that in his music for his first two projects, right? But like to me it just gets extreme because it's like he was the lonely stoner before, and he would talk about being sad at times, or he would talk about drugs, but it was just weed, right? But now you're talking about some pretty dark really amplifications of those themes that you were mentioning.
Oh yes, and it's funny because this is definitely up to this point was the darkest dip into Cudi's psyche and his demons. But the thing about that made it great is like it was him exploring his demons in such a raw form and all in such a unique way to his, and that's true to his style. The reason why I say that because like songs like it's a rap album, but Cudi always dabbled and kind of blended the lines with some of his production choices. He kind of diversified his sounds more to the point that it's even so now he has a boom bap element. He has more rock influence flair with songs like "Erase Me."
In like CeeLo Green and Mary J. Blige features.
He's like on those songs, but also in songs like "The End," which is honestly one of the most, I guess, reminiscent of A Kid Named Cudi days and simpler sounding production, kind of, or more traditional hip hop production.
More straightforward rap.
That we've heard from Cudi in a while. But by doing that and across the board on all these, even though it's a diverse sound across the project, the mood is always, I won't say always the same because certain songs are lighter moments, but similar to like "Erase Me" or the sonically, but the themes are always persistent and it's always there, and he's always exploring this darkness that's kind of haunting him throughout. And even some of the song titles you can tell.
Yeah, of course. And people love rappers that they can relate to, right? And I think that's what Kid Cudi really mastered with this album was putting what his dark demons were in real life into music form. And like that's really what makes this album great, is just the emotion behind it, right? And it's real life stuff. Like that's what he was living through. And like you said, the mood changes a little bit throughout, right? Like I know the way he had the album set up, it was through 5 acts. So he had The World I Am Ruling as Act 1, the intro. And then he goes into A Stronger Trip, which I think includes like Don't Play This Song and songs that kind of go more into the drug stuff.
Yeah.
And then Party On, you mentioned Erase Me being like a lighter mood song. I know that's in Party On. And then the transformation is when it gets really dark. That's when he start talking about a lot of the sadness stuff. And then Act 5, the final one, is You Live and You Learn, which kind of has that conclusive type title to it.
Yeah, very dramatic ending to the project, and it's ending because some of the production on like songs like All Along is just simple drums and a beautiful ensemble of strings in the background, but it's a sad realization of kind of like, well, all along I guess I've been this way. I guess I'm here. And similar, and on songs like Ghost, it's kind of like a reflection of itself, and kind of a greater reflection of itself, but open, more, instead of a drug-induced reflection, it's just a sober kind of state of mind almost.
Yeah.
And Trapped in My Mind, of course, the man still feeling trapped despite all of this, and kind of realizing this is where he stands.
It kind of ends it with I Am What I Am.
Yeah, it's aware, but it's a sad ending but even though the production is still almost something you would hear out of a horror movie, if you will.
Yeah. I know, obviously this is Man on the Moon 2, so this is part 2 of the Man on the Moon series. And I know earlier when we were talking, you mentioned that there was supposed to be a part 3 even.
Yeah, originally it was supposed to be a trilogy, apparently. According to the interview from Kid Cudi in, I believe, 2009.
When Man on the Moon 1 came out?
Yeah, when he first dropped, it was actually... the title original Man on the Moon was supposed to be The Ghost in the Machine. But then he said he was working on the title for the third Man on the Moon, apparently. So... I believe the third Man on the Moon, even though the compilation album of everything was supposed to be just Cutter and whatnot, he was supposed to, because he said he was lining up different artists to work with. When I mentioned like, he wanted to work with Kings of Leon, Robin Thicke, even The Killers on that album, but Man on the Moon 3 never really took form, and Man on the Moon 2, he stated, he's like, well, I have the form for Man on the Moon 2. The Man on the Moon 2 is supposed to be the bringing you into his dreams. Yeah. But then bringing you for like Man on the Moon 1, but then also the reality of this one. That's what Man on the Moon 2 is facing. It's like, even though you have the end of days, and which is the end of your dreams, you now have the dark, legendary, even though it's kind of oxymoron. It's kind of an oxymoron in the sense of, it's a legend. You would think something out of fable is kind of beyond us, but then it's just Mr. Rager in the end. This is the guy. This is the real deal, what he's dealing with instead of...
And that's why I'm kind of happy in retrospect that part 3 never came out. I mean, it's almost like The Godfather 3, right? Like people joke like, oh, you see the ending of Godfather 2. Why did they ever have to make a Godfather 3? And I kind of feel the same way because... like you mentioned, the album ends with All Along and Ghost and Trapped in My Mind, right?
Right.
And those songs, the conclusion from the songs is I am what I am, and I'm sad and lonely. That's just what I am, right? And to me, that's the perfect way to end it. I don't think you need a part 3 to go any further into that.
Yeah, it's like, only way I would really desire a part 3 well, I guess later down the line, Indica kind of came part 3, but at the same time, it's not to truly encapsulate the feeling of Man on the Moon 2. I guess I would want something almost like a Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying. How that kind of it was more of a lighter kind of approach to, even though it still tackled themes of darkness as always. Mm-hmm. He had more triumphant sounding songs and had triumphant approach to some of the life, like some of the things he deals with in his life. That's the only way I would appreciate a Man on the Moon 3. But considering what we got, I'm pretty happy and pretty
Agreed, for sure.
satisfied without a necessary third sequel. But
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe we'll come about one day.
Something I like thinking about with this album is the fact that like this came out 2 years into his fame, right?
Right.
Like I said, A Kid Named Cudi, 2008, The End of Day, Man on the Moon Part 1, 2009, and then now we're in 2010. So it's just, 1, 2, 3, bam, 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 those 3 years, right? But then on the other hand, I think about like, when do I consider new Kid Cudi? Like, when would you say new Kid Cudi was?
Indica.
Like, right, Indica, right?
Yeah, it's like,
And you think about it, okay, Indica came out in 2013. It came out like a week after he left Good Music. So that
Yep.
so not just like a different sound, but also a new artist, right? He's free or whatever.
it's a new chapter in his life,
Yeah, and then like the single, Just What I Am, that's kind of like new Kid Cudi too. He's like, oh, I'm back to smoking.
Yeah.
And that came out in late 2012. So I just kind of think about like, man, this huge career arc for him was all in the span of just 5 years. Like this peak fame for him, which was probably at the time of this album with Man on the Moon 2, it just came in like 2 years into his career. And not calling Kid Cudi like Tupac or Eminem, but like it's kind of reminiscent of runs that they went on in their career. Like Eminem debut came out in 1999. By 2002, he's got 3 classic albums and he's in 8 Mile.
Yeah.
And then Tupac, the last 5 years of his life, he's dropping a classic every year. And he's in
movies.
He's in a bunch of movies, right? Not just
They're
one
cultural.
movie.
They're now stapled into the cultural.
Yeah. So I'm
Right.
not going to say he's the icon that Tupac was
But no, he's.
Yeah.
I know what you're not.
I'm just saying like this
meteoric arc is pretty hard.
yeah,
to
it's just
find.
such a quick rise to fame. Like just a timeline, like 2008, he's with Good Music. Same year, A Kid Named Cudi comes out. He appears on 808s and Heartbreaks and all that, and he starts getting big like basically from then on. That's when Day and Night came out too.
Right.
And so really from then on, he was a superstar immediately. And then 2009 debut album, second project comes out. And then by 2010, he's taking the Tupac route. He's in One Tree Hill for an episode, right? Like he plays Erase Me on One Tree Hill, and then he's like a starring character in the HBO show Make It in America.
He is.
So like, I mean, when I say Tupac-esque, I'm not saying he's Tupac. I'm just saying like he got famous quick and was in movies.
Yeah, he was a man that kind of broke out and was marching to his own beat.
Yeah.
Since he definitely, and I think even though, yet again, not calling Kid Cudi Tupac, I want that to be completely clear.
Yeah.
But Cudi has been in the game for over what? I guess almost 12 years
now.
Yeah. It's like he's been in the game for 12 years now. He's won his Grammys. He's sold over 60 million records. The man has a solid legacy for an artist that we once only knew from a mixtape and a feature on 2008's 808s and Heartbreak.
Yeah.
And for him to go from that one lonely stoner to being an influence upon a whole generation of artists in this forms of Travis Scott, who even Travis Scott, Juice WRLD, and a lot of the I would even say XXXTentacion and these younger SoundCloud generation artists that we've seen over the past couple of years. A lot of them cite growing up listening to Kid Cudi's projects or having some sort of empathy from
Kevin Abstract too. Yeah.
Kevin Abstract, very very good example. I think the lonely stoner outdid himself, and it's kind of like, and I feel like, especially if you have the meteoric rise at such a young age, it's kind of like, where do you go from there? So it makes sense for him to kind of branch out and do other things.
Yeah.
Especially dealing with these mental illnesses, probably feel a lot of stress on you.
Yeah.
A lot on you.
What cracks me up about the influence thing is like the first guy people think of is Travis Scott, right? For the Kid Cudi influence.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, Travis Scott's first project came out 3 years after this came out. Like, talk about a quick legacy, right? Like
Yeah.
he impacted people quickly.
He definitely did. And also it's funny how he marketed himself as well, because he did make appearances on, where you mentioned One Tree Hill,
Yeah.
but dude was also on a Cleveland show, the Cleveland show.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had the episode when Kanye was on the Cleveland show. He was on that episode too. He's on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and now he's currently, well, he was on Westworld. I don't know if he's still on. I haven't watched the late seasons, but
Yeah, fitting that he's on shows with Cleveland and Brooklyn in their title, right?
yeah, very, very fitting.
Yeah, of course. Kid Cudi is from Cleveland and then became famous in Brooklyn, right?
Yep.
I think as far as like a timeline goes, like we mentioned, this is kind of when his music gets a little bit darker, right? He's always had these themes of sadness, but this is when things get dark. And it's reflected in real life too, I think, a little bit. Like we mentioned, this is probably him at his peak fame. I'm sure that's a lot to do with it, but a lot was going in his life. Like I didn't realize early in 2010, like he had a daughter. Like I knew he had a kid, but I had no idea it was that early on. And then we talk about drugs, and of course the big one for this album is cocaine, right? That's
Heavy.
That's a huge theme throughout the album, is the fact that he knows he needs to stop taking cocaine, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that in June of 2010, he was arrested in Manhattan for criminal mischief and possession of a controlled substance, which of course was
cocaine.
Yeah. I mean, he had fame, but he had dark stuff going on, and I think those events were what really brought out the dark themes on the album. And then I think artistically, you mentioned him branching out, and I know, like, not just from different career paths like acting, but even within the music, the music videos for the album I thought were great. Erase Me was a fun one, like he dresses up like Jimi Hendrix and all that, but the Mr. Rager video, like you can find YouTube videos analyzing the Mr. Rager video, talking about like, oh, which one of the characters in the video is actually the Rager, right? Stuff like that. And then the Maniac music video was directed by Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. And
it just was starring Kid Cudi and Cage. And I think Kid Cudi speaks French in it too. And like he definitely is trying to embrace his artistic side more.
Yeah, he definitely, I think from even probably from this album's inception, he knew he wanted to showcase Kid Cudi as a whole, Scott Mascudi as the man, like the whole, what is he interested in and what is he currently trying to prove, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think the music videos, especially Mr. Rager, kind of explore these themes of like, all right, who is this, like his identity, this battle with identity, but also this still dormant piece of like what he knows his core self is, and that we kind of always go back to, like, oh, we know Cudi and it's funny because one things that people love about Kid Cudi and became memes nowadays, mm-hmm. is like Kid Cudi's hum.
Yeah, the humming. Whereas this album's kind of like the moaning, right?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And it's the moaning, but it's funny because I remember watching a video by, I believe it was not a speech pathologist, but something along those lines, a linguist.
Oh, I think it was a Rap Genius video that did it, where the linguist is analyzing his hums.
Yes, and talking about how it creates a sense of closeness and intimacy between the hummer and the people.
Yeah, it's so hilarious.
So it's hilarious that a man, throughout, even though he's letting out all these emotions and exposing all these different demons, something as simple as a moan or a hum has lasted and impacted on the hearts of many for over a decade now. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah. It's definitely the perfect touch on the album, the moaning.
Yeah.
Something that I think is important to think about when analyzing something we consider a top 20 album of the decade is kind of how our perception and how public perception has changed a bit over time. And I think this is a fun album to look at that for, because this is an early one, right? This was 2010. And we've had a lot of time to kind of view
Sit
its
with
impact as opposed to an album that came out last year. If we had it, you can't really judge it in the same way.
Very true.
And in my eye, I loved it then, I loved it now. And when we talk about how influential it is, I think people hold it as highly regarded as they did then. And if you were to ask most people, what is Kid Cudi's classic album? I think they'd say this one. What do you think?
I would definitely agree. It's funny because I think the album personally changed. I guess what people could relate to and what people were open to. Because I think people enjoyed the album beforehand, but I guess on the topic of mental health and mental and just openness and like kind of emotional rawness more so in hip hop in this type of degree.
Saying that since it's more prevalent now, you can appreciate the album more now?
Yeah, I think a lot of people appreciate the album more now. I think also younger people can appreciate the album more now because it's not a more of a foreign concept anymore. It's kind of, if not a trend, but hopefully now it's going to be established as like a norm with the rises of some of these people that actually were influences or actually took from Kid Cudi's lead that became prevalent, like X and Ski, and
definitely,
and Kevin Abstract.
I think from nostalgia purposes, yeah. I think like this is an album people get nostalgic about, right? Like anyone who was a teenager at the time, or maybe even like in their early 20s, those are the people that still like champion for this album as one of the best of the decade.
I would definitely believe so. Definitely agree.
You want to get into 3 favorite songs?
Whew. My 3 favorite songs from Man on the Moon 2. It's funny because if you would have asked me this a couple years ago, I would have had a different choice of songs. But upon re-listening to it, and also I think just maturity through life and the album that has been out for a decade, my 3 favorite songs nowadays are actually Don't Play This Song, The End, and All Along.
Wow. So I'm going to let you analyze on that, but I'm kind of surprised. I'm just kind of surprised because I was thinking we would have at least one overlap, but no, mine 3 are all different. So why those 3?
Well, Don't Play This Song I thought was because Rebel Feb is kind of like, it was transition from that to Don't Play This Song.
Yeah.
I felt like it was like the beginning rawness of the album, and also hearing him sounding so at home with a Mary J. Blige feature, and also his lyrics, some of the lyrics on that song,
they hit hard.
Yes, it's extremely. Like, first verse is pain, starts with pain, hurt, sadness, and loneliness. Ball that shit right up, toss away into the bottomless pit. It kind of, I think these dark spiraling thoughts are. What?
There's a line where he says, "Think I should hit decline. I'm numb faced while I'm thinking about suicide." Talking about when his mom calls him and he's high on cocaine, thinking about killing himself. Yeah, that's the darkest lyric on the album, probably.
Easy. And then like he even talks about how his it's like he sees this Black Robin Hood, but then the blogs say Cudi's lame. He's wearing a kilt. He must be gay. Like, it's like he's battling with all these different feelings and all these different criticisms coming from all types of angles, and I can see that weighing on a person. And I think it was interesting, and I think it was really could stick now and even be applicable to this day for many artists in the field. Like when having this feeling of like, wow, I'm just trying to do me. I feel like I'm trying to champion this one sound, or I'm trying to express myself, but then I get shit on by everyone. I think it's a pretty cool song to have in your top 3.
Yeah, I think for a young person listening to it, like even though you have those super dark lyrics too, you also have the lyrics like you mentioned, like the funny ones, but like he says he's Grape Cigarillo Man, and he says like I never gave a fuck about a Scantron too. Like I can totally see a teenager in high school listening to it and be like, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's like, I don't give a fuck about. Or it's like, nowadays, like, bet some girls tweet how they miss my meat. It's like, for that. And, the end, honestly, the end's one of my favorites because I think I just like hearing Cudi on a track like that, on instrumental of that. It's kind of hazy. I like hearing him collab with. I love hearing him with Chip the Ripper. Him and, like, I feel like it's a really good Cleveland chemistry right there whenever that goes on. GLC sounded really smooth on it. Partner told me a long time ago. It's like the way he came on the track was smooth, player like, but also it was like not old heads perspective, but it was kind of it brought a different dynamic to the album, and it kind of, and his slow approach to the song, and everyone's kind of laid back, but
they all have that slow flow.
It's almost like a slurring of the pacing of the album. And I think that was a really cool thing. And the way Nicole Ray hops on, I never do it again. It's almost haunting and creepy the way I never do it again. And because she doesn't end, she just keeps saying this.
Exactly.
So I'm like, what?
Is this the end?
It's like,
he keeps saying it.
It's like, are you sure this is the end? And then All Along comes along. And All Along is just, I love the swooping. I love the strings in the song. I love the simplicity of it, and how there's no effects on Cudi's voice like that. And no, it's just Cudi letting people know and Baron kind of like, hey, this is it. I've all along.
I'm forever alone.
Yes. It's like, all along, I am here, and I will be here, and I have to deal with this. And this is how I felt. It's like, I feel like it's a pretty beautiful way to kind of, instead of going from this looping cycle of being like, oh, this isn't the end. I don't know, like, maybe this is, maybe it's not. It's kind of like battling addiction. Like, well, it is the end. I'm going to quit today. But it's like, all along, it's like, no, it's not. I'm still going to have to deal with this. I think that was a pretty cool transition, and I really love that song.
Definitely.
To this day.
Well, for me, my 3 favorite songs, what's kind of funny is it's the transformation section of the album, the dark side, and it's 3 songs back to back consecutive. Maniac, then Mr. Rager, then These Worries.
Oh, so you picked the other Mary J song.
The These Worries one. I really like These Worries. Like we keep mentioning with the cocaine references, that one's big for the cocaine because before each verse you can hear him doing a line of cocaine. He goes, yeah, like he's like, oh, I'm back, and then he goes back into rapping. I always love the symbolism in that, and the part of the song where he's like, life is like that, beat me up and I'll fight right back, poof poof be gone. That's one of like perfect melody parts of the whole album. And then the second time that it comes through and you have Mary J. Blige singing it in unison with him, that's perfect. And then Maniac's probably my number 1 favorite on the whole album. That's the one that I probably listen to the most, and I love the beat, I love the lyrics, I love the chorus, and I like the music video, and I love Cage's verse on it. The way he comes in with the I am the maniac, I am the fool. And Cage is someone who a lot of people probably aren't familiar with that love Kid Cudi, and I only know him for 2 songs, The Ballad of Worms and Agent Orange, and then the fact that he and Eminem were in a beef back in the day. That's all I knew him for before this album came out, and I just love the verse he came with on the song. And then Mr. Rager is another one with a good music video that I loved. I love the raw singing, kind of like how you said All Along. You just like how no edits, just the raw singing. I love that on Mr. Rager. It's just a song that you just sing along to sometimes, just as loud as you can, just sing along with it.
And know it's funny that I said like my preferences changed over the years.
Yeah.
Because Maniac and Mr. Rager were my 2 like go-to songs.
Okay.
Like, I remember I used to play Maniac like it's too damn much because that the way the like the make the black that black hole that make the black
the sample black. At the beginning
that sample is ridiculous.
Yeah,
the drums is crazy, the breakdown in the middle with the guitar, electric guitar,
The outro
beautiful.
when they kind of have the voices overlapping with each other.
Yeah, and the
back
echoing,
forth.
and
Yeah.
even when you listen to the headphones, it swaps spots. It's
Perfect.
pretty. Yeah, it's a great haunting track. It makes you feel like you're going crazy. I love it. And Mr. Rager, because it's kind of like Mr. Rager and All Along SWAT for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I like I love Mr. Rager too. It's just All Along grew on me more.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you're like, oh,
I just haven't matured yet. I guess that's what that means.
Not even.
You grew up.
Not even, bro.
I think just before we end, since it didn't make any of our personal favorite songs, I do want to comment on it with "Erase Me."
Yes.
Just because of Kanye's verse, I just have to get out of the way that the whole diarrhea line, that's like the most iconic Kanye lyric ever in my mind. It's just so stupid and absurd, and I love it.
It was definitely one of, because like she said, "Hi, I'm Maria." Is like the way he said, "No, you an angel." You wave high to Aaliyah. Like the way he came on this, I was like, this is one of the most. At first, you go, oh, it's kind of like it's kind of wholesome, kind of the most tongue-in-cheek yay lines I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And then for him to close it out, "I hope you die, Aria," is like,
Yeah, I guess I should clarify the full lyric is, "I couldn't get my shit out anyway. I hope you die, Aria." But of course, diarrhea sounds like diarrhea. And he said, "Couldn't get my shit out anyway." And part of why I love it so much is I just like to imagine Kanye writing the verse, and he was like, "Diarrhea, diarrhea," and then he just like wrote the whole verse with this one punchline in mind. Like he was like, "Aaliyah, Maria, Korea, Arena," and he's like, "Oh, this is perfect. I gotta do everything to make this diarrhea pun."
Bro really had a line. It was like, "Monica Lewinsky on your dress, take you to the cleaners," just so he could continue this Aria.
Yeah, I know.
And is like some of the things he did just to keep this one punchline and make it get to that final part. It was definitely a highlighting moment for Kanye's more playful side of rapping. Also, I do want to make one note. Actually, it's interesting that the songs that Cudi talks most prevalently about his like cocaine use and like high, he features Mary J. Blige.
Don't
like,
play this song and these words. Yeah,
is like, because Mary J. Blige is famously known for, well, of course, her artistry, but her battle with addiction herself. So it's pretty interesting that he's like, "Yo, Mary J, hop on this song about me dealing with my current cocaine battles and you dealing with," and you could kind of lend your voice. And
I never thought about it like that.
yeah, I remember I played the song for my mom, actually. She's like, "That makes sense." Shout out to my mom. All right, but I think we kind of settled up everything for Man on the Moon too.
Yeah, I mean, just if I had to sum it all up and conclude it, great album, but it's really that legacy and that influence of how it changed rap and how it really touched a lot of the rappers that in 2020 are some of the biggest in the game. The way he touched them with this album, I think not just how great it is, but it's that factor that really pushes it over the top to make its way in the top 20.
I agree. And it's kind of ironic because our number 19 pick on the list is coming from one of the offspring of Cudi's creativity. It is "The Days Before Rodeo" by Travis Scott.
Yep. Yeah, this was Travis Scott's second mixtape. Although when he released it, he just called it a free album. But
yeah.
Really, what is a mixtape versus a free album? Am I right?
Right.
So, ironically, this was an album that he released as like a hype for. Of course, his debut album was Rodeo. That's why I called it Days Before Rodeo. He released it just kind of like a hype, and then Rodeo came out a year later in 2015. This came out on August 18, 2014. And it only came out less than 2 years probably after people started really noticing Travis Scott. When I think of a rapper who is really set up for superstardom, I don't want to use the term industry plant because that comes with a lot of negative connotation.
Yeah.
That's really not a nice word to throw around. Like they'll call like Rory that or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call Travis Scott that. But I mean, you just look at how his career started. And, like, this dude was really set up for superstardom. He was 22 when Days Before Rodeo came out, so I guess that means he was 20 when he got signed to Grand Hustle, T.I.'s label. 20 when he was signed to Good Music as a producer for Kanye West's label. By the end of the year, he was on Cruel Summer on the song Sin City. And then Quintana came out. He was a 2013 XXL freshman. And like all that happened in the span of months. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was really set up for superstardom that way.
Yeah, it's crazy because the man signed with, even before Good Music, Epic Records. He had a big major label deal. And then literally November that same year, he gets signed with Good Music for production. And then Grand Hustle comes for a record deal. It's like if there's ever an artist that was poised for, had the necessary backing to be poised for greatness, I think Travis Scott was definitely amongst the top of them, especially in the hip hop.
He had huge guys, huge, big, influential guys co-signing him.
Yeah, it's like you had, even on songs like, even on his mixtape before this, Owl Pharaoh, which self-released 2013, it's kind of like he had features from people like 2 Chainz. He had features from Wale. He had A$AP Ferg, and even T.I. himself, Grand Hustle, on Upper Echelon.
Mm-hmm.
For artists to come off that hype, it's just kind of like what. And for Days Before Rodeo to just be another hype builder for his debut project is like,
I know.
It kind of makes the question like, whoa, what is Days Before Rodeo? Like, how, if this is just kind of like the hype builder, then what can we expect?
Exactly.
And I think it's safe to say that it outdid itself in terms of like a hype builder. You would think like it would be some throwaway tracks, but which in respect, I guess it could be compared if he's like, oh, this is Rodeo, this is Days Before. But
yeah, I mean, for me, when I think of Days Before Rodeo, I think of it as Travis Scott's breakout album. But to my surprise, like, because I remember, like we mentioned, he was so set up for success that when Owl Pharaoh came out, and I love the song Quintana and all that, I remember being disappointed by Owl Pharaoh.
Yes.
But I was kind of confused reading some reviews on the internet earlier when I'm doing my Days Before Rodeo re-listens and stuff. Like, people liked Owl Pharaoh a lot. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I didn't. It was funny because I remember back in the day going on Genius forums and going on Kanye Tilla.
Yeah,
it was interesting because I remember talking crap about certain song. I'm like, oh, the mixing on Chaz's interlude is isn't really great.
Yeah,
it's like, and then people defended that song to the T, or even in which I consider was like one of the weaker tracks. But even though it's interesting that people had praised Travis in such a high caliber, in such a high ranking, hold him up such high ranking, such early on.
You're saying with Owl Pharaoh, like, people already loving him.
Yeah, but like, even though that was a pretty rough self-release compared to when you go Days for Rodeo, and when he gets the backing, even further backing and public praise, catapulting off of this. Yeah. On Rodeo.
Yeah, and you can't talk about Days Before Rodeo without talking about Rodeo for 2 reasons. One, Days Before Rodeo, like we said, was released as a teaser hype for Rodeo. And then 2, I think what I noticed is a lot of people view Rodeo as his best album. So I think having Days Before Rodeo in their top 20 but not having Rodeo, I think that probably is going to throw some people for a loop, right?
Oh, it definitely will. It definitely will. I think some people also, I think it's justifiable because I think it's what you prefer. Because Days Before Rodeo, to me, feels like it feels like Travis Scott was still exploring his sound, but on Owl Pharaoh, he didn't really have a unique sound just yet. You could tell the influences were super heavy. Days Before, he was exploring it, but at the same time, he had a more definable voice. It's like, okay, this is Travis Scott. Like when I hear Quintana Part 2, it's like the speed switches up, the crooning on the second half of just auto-tune with him, ooh, 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 like him doing that.
Yeah.
Which would something he would go on to do on even songs like Skyfall, with that heavily voice modified, almost ominous drone or croon. It has become kind of synonymous with Travis with some of these things, and also must pay homage to like Kid Cudi with his humming and moaning. But it seems like on this project I was able to distinguish that more so than on Rodeo, because on Rodeo songs like 3500 and on Piss on Your Grave, it's certain songs kind of blended that, or kind of were harkening more on his influences more so, and the kind of this, even though he was still discovering himself and still trying to find his own voice, I think he was being a little more adventurous. And because Drugs You Should Try, one is like, considering this album dropped in 2014, is often considered one of Travis's best songs to this date. And the songs like Backyard is like, it was so, the beat was great, and the song was pretty, even though it wasn't the most hyped song on the project, such as a Mamacita. Both of those songs kind of stood the test of time, and I think Backyard was even used in, I believe, Logic's album Incredible True Story, Stainless. The beat was flipped, and a few other artists have also remixed the same beat in the same song. I didn't know that. Yeah, Stainless was made because he heard Backyard, flipped, and told Six to flip the beat, because we can't get the original, but let's do this.
Yeah.
So I think the album, and in fact I still hear Mamacita in like contenders for Travis Scott songs, top Travis Scott songs to this day. I think the album definitely deserves a spot. And I understand that people have different opinions with like saying Rodeo should take over, but preference wise, I believe. Yeah,
I can see a lot of people thinking Rodeo, that's his best album. And I mean, I see it all the time, people saying that Rodeo is his best album. And I mean, I get why, because when I think of when Travis, I keep throwing around the word stardom and superstardom. Like Rodeo is really when he blew up. Obviously he was huge already, so I don't want to make it sound like he was this unknown guy when Days Before Rodeo came out. But like when Rodeo came out, that's when he really became huge with songs like Antidote and all that, right? Like that's what really propelled him into one of the most popular rappers still to this day, right?
Right.
And I also think Rodeo is an album that has really high highs, like Maria, I'm Drunk, Oh My Decide, 90210, like In Antidote, Apple Pie I love too. And so I think sometimes people's perception of Rodeo might get overrated by having those high highs. Because I know for me, like those are some of my favorite Travis Scott songs. But then when I look at the album from front to finish, it's like, oh, I love those songs, but hey, that's 6 songs on like a 16 or 18 track album, right?
Right. And that's the thing. That's another thing with Days Before that I must give credit to. I feel like even though the project itself, even though it's not the production money, the money behind it and the production isn't as dramatic as a Rodeo, or even you could argue polished. The condensed nature of it, for being only 12 tracks, technically 11 if you want to consider Bach as a true bonus track. It doesn't have much room for error or filler, and I think it capitalizes on that pretty well. You could, because from going from The Prayer to Mamacita, Quintana, and Drugs You Should Try, that gives you pretty diverse sounding songs just in the first 4 tracks, and gives you a pretty good feel of like, okay, this is what this Travis Scott guy could kind of do. And then you go to Don't Play featuring Big Sean in a 1975 flip is pretty interesting, pretty insane itself to take 90, especially after finding out that the 1975's, I believe it was tracks. I think it was Chocolate or Money. It was Money.
Yeah, it was Money that he sampled.
Yeah. It's like him taking that is pretty ridiculous and pretty interesting to see. It shows you both the production range of Travis as well as his
creative vision.
Yeah. It's like, and what he was able to, and the kind of the scope of like where he could go with his talents.
Mm-hmm.
But in a condensed manner, and everything had to be kind of on point with it only being 12 tracks. With Rodeo, songs like, even though a lot of people like songs, pornography, Piss on Your Grave, Nightcrawler, it's kind of like it's kind of bloated with some of the features in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost because of his longer and extended discography or track listing, it can have some weaker moments. It has more room for error. Even songs like Wasted with Juicy J, like it's like you couldn't afford to have that if you're trying to build hype. I think that's the thing about this Days Before Rodeo. It effectively built hype for Travis Scott.
Yeah,
Rodeo just kind of had to deliver something.
Days Before Rodeo, I mean, not a lot of guys really release teaser albums or hype albums, right?
No.
And that's what kind of makes this unique. And in my mind, like it's perfect in that way because the album really set him up for that big push that Rodeo gave him. And like you said with the filler, that's what I mean, and just in general, I like Days Before Rodeo too, but just the fact that it's this condensed album, like maybe one song I don't like on it, but for the most part I like every track. And so I mean I like the album more. I really like how it set up Travis Scott's career to be this huge guy once Rodeo came out. Mm-hmm. Just great production, and then very brief 12 songs, but 11 of them are great.
Yeah, I think it was a good example of building hype and diversifying sound and capitalizing on kind of like this new funding and backing that he truly had. Because even looking at the production list, like he had Wonder Girl, Metro Boomin, DJ Dahi, FKI, Lex Luger. He had a lot of different people moving in a lot of different. I don't want to get into the writer's credits and all this stuff. Rich Homie, and he had features from Rich Homie Quan, Young Thug, Big Sean, as we met. Migos and Pee Wee Longway. Migos at the height of their well, I won't say at the height of their fame, but at the beginning of their
explosive
rise to power and cultural significance. It was pretty interesting, and even had background vocals from James Fauntleroy. Yeah, like which shout out to Cocaine 80s
on Gray, right?
Yep. Yeah, shout out. So that's the album we all need. But it was. I think he is a good example of an artist utilizing his resources to like the best of his ability. Really. Yeah. And like
the funny thing mentioning production is, I mean that's going to be the first thing you notice listening to Travis Scott's music, probably. Yes. And with this album, the production is great, right? Like without the production, this album wouldn't be number 19 on our list. But I guess at the time, I didn't realize how little of this album Travis Scott produced. Yeah. Because like he was signed to Good Music as a producer. He had producing credits on Yeezus and like Magna Carta, Holy Grail. Yeah. So like people knew him as both a rapper and a producer. So I guess at the time I just kind of assumed that he produced this album. But then you look at the production credits, and like you said, it really was mostly other guys. Obviously that doesn't take away from the album. Most guys don't produce their albums. The production's great. And I'm sure he had like, you can tell he had his sound. He has a supervision over all of it. So,
I don't think he lost.
Production was great though. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he lost like his vision over the project by like handing it to certain people. I don't think it was like T.I. and Kanye like, you're gonna do this sounding song, Travis. I'm pretty sure he had the final say. It just, but like I said, because I was under the same impression as well. I thought Travis was more heavily involved in the production of this, considering how that he had that that image of like the next big rapper producer double threat.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see that he actually did not go into that, not go play the producer role as much on this project.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a hot take to say this, but on the other side of production, like lyrically, I think this is the best rapping he's ever done on a project.
Honestly,
I don't know if it's a hot take.
It's like if not this, it's pretty damn close. And also, I think he brought out some pretty good lyrics out of other people. Honestly, in Confession Time, Young Thug's verse on Skyfall made me solidified me as a Young Thug fan, definitely, because I had never heard someone say diamonds wet like a bottom from a squid.
I love the way he starts the verse. I'm it. And you're like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Like a game played by kids. It's like, oh, okay, that's funny.
Diamonds water like a bottle from a squid. Blacker than Akon's kids. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, this is vintage Young Thug for sure on this album with his 2 features. Because, like, it's vintage Young Thug when he's saying something completely stupid, but you're rocking with it, right?
Oh, when it's, like, barely comprehensible. Like, on his verse on Mamacita, some of the lyrics on there is like, yo, Thug, who said this was okay?
These bitches want to molest me, they'll sex me, she a lesbian, she want chicken like sesame. Like, I still don't know what that means, chicken like sesame. Like, she just wants chicken? I don't know. But, like, but that's what makes it vintage Young Thug, right?
Very, very, very. And it was a very appreciated element to this project.
Yeah. You want to get into 3 favorite tracks?
My three favorite. I kind of gave a sneak preview of one of them, Backyard. It's definitely up there. Is even my I had that as even one of my alarms for like a long time.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, my phone. But I would probably do Backyard. I'm gonna do Drugs You Should Try. I'm cliche. And my third would have to be it's a tie between Gray and The Prayer.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Okay.
Because I love Skyfall's. I love Thug's verse Skyfall, but like Travis' verse is cool, but it was but Backyard, I love the production on it. His pronunciation and his delivery on the flow on his flow on Backyard was a switch up in pace for him, and also like what some of the subject matter, like the lines that kind of stood out to me, like the Pops ain't raised no bitch, I swung, I missed, he swung, he hit, I hit that ditch. Like, it was a weird little moment, because we don't really get moments like that with him, at least this prevalent. We didn't get that as much on like Owl Pharaoh, and even to this day we kind of get more superficial bars about like
he doesn't really laugh like that anymore.
No, like it's like one of the closest things he's done to that thus far. Most recently is like songs like Coffee Bean and whatnot on Asher World.
Yeah,
but I appreciate hearing even just little snippets or stuff like that. Even like, Backyard, him being more reminiscent of things like that. It's interesting that he get a different side of Travis. Also, again, production on the song fire. Gray it was interesting because of the slow, also another change of pace, like the slow down, almost harkening back to Blocka on Owl Pharaoh, and also for Pusha T. It's the hook and like the wig when the sun goes down, the deeper voice vocal inflections, the almost island like
pretty tropical sounding.
Yeah, production on it mixed with still trap and the synth flares at the end that come about for the song's conclusion. It was a really interesting song to hear him on, and he sounded very at home on that type of production, and I think some of that even carried over later on in Rodeo, that heavily synth based, because songs like Pray for Love and like the breakdowns, the chorus in the background, or the choral sample could be probably on at the end of the song, mixed in with everything, gave it a dramatic flair that I think Travis kind of started to make synonymous with his music. And the prayer, I think just the almost nocturnal, claustrophobic kind of vibe to it. Just start off the whole, for a hype project, starts off pretty claustrophobic. Like, it's nothing but these organs and then him rapping at a quicker pace than usual.
Yeah.
But also it's just focusing on just Travis, the rapper.
Yeah, I had it in my top 3 also. I mean, like, something that still gets me fired up to this day is when he's rapping and he hits the part with the sipping on the liquor, still rolling up swishers, and then the beat drops.
Yeah.
That's like, that gets me hyped every time still. And just that song is like, I don't know, the best produced Travis Scott song ever. I don't know, man. Like, I love the production on that song, and just the way the piano comes in at the way end when he's done rapping. I love it. Like you said, drugs, you should try it. I'd had that in my top 3 also. I picked it, but like you said, pretty cliche. A lot of people say that's their favorite Travis Scott song.
And drugs you should try. Yeah, it's cliche but I think it's kind of like him beginning to polish that like heavily auto-tune, because and I feel like he kind of what he did work with James Fauntleroy on Al Farrow, like on Drive and whatnot, because it kind of reminds you of James's part on that a little bit, with the heavily auto-tune and like the and the slightly, like, especially the not vocoder type of but the effects that he chose to put on his voice were very spacious, and I think that was interesting because it was spacious but still claustrophobic in the sense of the trap beat, because it's still in the confines of a trap song, because with the hi-hats and the breakdowns, is for a song about intimacy, but you have intimacy through both drugs and Travis's switch up in delivery and kind of subject matter.
Yeah, it's really well written.
So we don't have you don't get that side of Travis very, like, well, at least at this point we didn't. We had glimpse of it, but we haven't had it kind of refined to this point yet. And I think even to this day, he still tries to encapsulate that, but I don't think it's also the roughness of it as well. Like the delivery of it kind of gives it a genuine sense of intimacy and kind of rawness. Then that we don't really get on these now greater produced and greater refined tracks, but it kind of loses that sense to it, that feeling.
Yeah, I love the last minute on Drugs You Should Try It. Like, I know it's a silly thing to think about, but when I think of like just outros to songs, even like that's just the perfect outro to a song. And something I never realized, I thought Travis was just doing auto-tune Kid Cudi like moans throughout the song, but I didn't realize that it was the outro played backwards. Like, I just found that out reading the lyrics on Rap Genius today. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
What?
Like, the next time you listen to the song, you will hear it and you'll never be able to unhear it, because I never noticed that. I thought he was just doing his woes and ohs and just like Kid Cudi type moaning, right? But no, it's the outro played backwards.
Wow.
It's him saying "When You're Home Alone in the Mood" backwards.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
And then the one song, my top 3 favorite that we didn't have in common was Mamacita. And I'm kind of surprised you didn't have Mamacita in your top 3. Just because, like, you and I always talk about, like, that was the song at the time that it came out. That was the song that everyone was loving. So in my mind, like, Mamacita, that's a classic song, but it's a classic chorus. It's a classic beat, classic Young Thug and Rich Homie Quan verses, like we were saying earlier. And then even the music video was great with the Day of the Dead type painting and stuff. Like,
and Travis being crucified.
Yeah.
Rich Homie Quan on a horse.
Yeah. I do have a confession with Mamacita, though.
What's up?
So, Rich Homie Quan, he's not the best at enunciating words, right?
Right.
But he in this song, he's iconic, right? He makes this song great with that classic chorus, even with his verse, the way like the drums are rolling in when he's like, "You're killing me remember, like, and then like the drums come in, he's like, remember me. But the chorus, classic chorus, right? I never knew that he was saying, and I ain't kin to Wayne, but that's my mama Sia.
Really?
I just didn't know what he was saying. I thought he was saying kin away. Like, I was like, what's kin away? He's saying, I ain't kin to Wayne, but that's my mama Sia. And that's a dope line. Like, I didn't even know.
Yeah, that was a fire. That was like one of the hardest parts. That's what made it iconic.
Dude, I had no idea until I read the lyrics today.
Oh, that's so...
I don't know how I never read the lyrics to that song before, but...
With all that mispronunciation.
I know. You'd think with the Rich Homie Quan song, you had to listen to read it with the lyrics, but... I don't know. I guess that never happened for me.
Whew, that's funny. Because I remember... Because I didn't get it as well until I read the lyrics. So I just assumed you read the lyrics way before 2020.
Apparently I didn't. Not until 6 years after the album came out.
Oh my god, this is crazy. That's awesome. Any other final thoughts on Days 4?
Yeah, I mean, short mixtape / free album, but solid, great throughout. And you think biggest rappers in the game today, Travis Scott immediately comes to mind. In my opinion, this is his best album. Even if Rodeo's his most iconic, maybe, I'm always going to be a Days Before Rodeo guy. And I think it's really the album that pushed him towards that superstardom, that superstar that he is today.
100% agree, my friend. 100%
All right.
agree. I think this number 18 spot is coming from the West Coast. We're changing things up.
Yeah, underground West Coast. We got Give Me My Flowers While I Can Still Smell Them. Long title, but normally people just call it Give Me Flowers or Flowers. But of course, it's by Blue and Exile. And this came out in 2012 officially, but officially on September 4th. But it was originally released unmastered in 2011, and it came at a point in Blue's career where a lot of his albums were all over the place because of label issues. Right. We'll get into that in a little bit, but he was 29 years old at the time and really in the prime of his career in my mind. As someone who's a big Blue fan, I always love this album because when people look at Blue or Blue and Exile as the group together, the duo that came out with the album, I think people will always recognize the 2007 album, Below the Heavens, and people just kind of stopped there, and that always bugged me because I really think Blue, not even just Blue, but Blue and Exile, like the sequel to it with this album, Give Me Flowers, like sometimes I like this album just as much, you know? And I just think it's such a great album that I think it definitely deserves to be in this top 20, but I also think it needs some light shed back on it after being a little unappreciated in the 8 years since it came out.
I definitely agree. It's interesting that you say that people kind of stop with Below the Heavens, because even it gets reference, if anything, from Blue and Exile, it's Below the Heavens. And it's funny because I remember listening to Give Me My Flowers. I was sitting there thinking, like, wow, because it is a 5-year gap between the two projects. So I was kind of anticipating this pretty heavily, but it was interesting that I was content. I wasn't disappointed with what I had heard. I was expecting kind of like, well, it's been 5 years, and also I've listened to some of these other projects. I've listened to some of these tracks that like I randomly find on YouTube or whatever of him that are coming from these other projects, like these other mix and these little EPs that he's been releasing after being signed and after having these label issues that weren't the most mastered or refined pieces of his work. But the thing about Give Me Flowers is that it delivers, even from the opening track. Like, it kind of a letter. It's almost like when you first listen to it, it's like receiving a letter that's like, oh, everything's still good. Like, everything is still fine. It's reassuring to hear that production, that heavily sampled bass, the almost flowery sounds to it. It was a cool way to kind of step back into the game as the duo, Blue and Exile.
Definitely. So like you said, this was a 5-year gap, and for me, like I'm such a Blue fan that I don't limit Blue to just Blue and Exile, and Exile being the producer in the duo, I should clarify. I don't limit Blue.
Both are technically rappers and producers.
Yeah,
both of them. But Blue's the Blue's a rapper.
Blue's produced a little bit in his time, and Exile has rapped a little bit in his time. But in this case, the duo, Blue's the rapper, Exile's the producer. As someone who's such a big Blue fan that doesn't just limit them to the Blue and Exile work, like I love Her Favorite Color, I love Good to Be Home, I love Johnson and Johnson. Like for me, I didn't have that kind of anticipation for this album in the sense like I was happy with everything I've been hearing. I hadn't been disappointed, and this album was great when it came out. So like I was expecting greatness, so I didn't need to believe anything otherwise. But I think for other people, they did just kind of look at Blue just from below the heavens, and I think that kind of created more hype for this album than it did for Blue fans. I think casual fans probably had more hype for this because they weren't listening to the stuff he had in between. They're only in it for Blue and Exile, and part of me blames them because I'm like, hey, you guys are missing out on some great music. Blue is one of my favorite rappers of all time. But part of me doesn't really disagree because what's Blue's 2 best albums? It's this one and Below the Heavens, right? So can I really blame them?
Both of them are with Blue and both of them are with Exile. So it's kind of, I understand where you're coming from. It's funny because we try to argue like, yeah, you should check out other stuff from Blue, and then people are like, oh, but I still like these more.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
I
think Blue also gets hurt kind of from like a Charles Hamilton effect.
Yeah.
Dude releases a lot of music, and there was a time where I listened to all of his music, but you get to a point where you just can't keep up with that, and I think that kind of muddies out the highlights in his career maybe. But with that being said, like maybe it muddies out good albums like Good to Be Home or Her Favorite Color, but I still think Give Me Flowers and I should stop mentioning Below the Heavens, I guess. This is about Give Me Flowers. I still think Give Me Flowers still shines above the rest throughout all that.
Yeah, and I think another project I personally enjoy is Bad Neighbor.
Yeah, Bad Neighbor with Madlib, right? Yeah.
It's like, I think because it's Blue sounded at home.
Yeah.
They sounded, because even with Blue's flow, which we're going to get into, he has a penchant for the traditional, but also he has a knack for switching up for little quirky little lines and flow switches.
Yeah,
you know, or even like some of the slurring on his words in some tracks. It like it fits it though, and these heavily sample based and still West Coast vibe having tracks. Is just Blues adding his own flares. He's animating the beat over the beat. It's almost like when you say people paint pictures with the words, like Blues literally just.
Yeah, that's how I've always viewed him. Yeah, that's how I've always viewed him as a rapper. Cause, like, if you ask me, do I think Blues a great rapper? I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. But I don't know if I could tell you my 5 favorite verses from him or something. Like, he's not a great rapper in the sense of like.
Punchline.
Yeah, he's not Big L with the punchlines, or he's not Lupe Fiasco with the complex stories. I think he's just a guy who, he can flow, but he knows what to do with the beat. Mm-hmm. This is one of the best produced albums of the decade in my opinion. But all of his albums, before he kind of gets into the lo-fi sound later in his career, but whenever he's like teaming up with a producer like this and he's rapping over really good production, like it's like he tailors his raps to it. And I think Blue really bounces off of Exile in this album, because I think that's gonna, like, when people like Below the Heavens, I think they love the beautiful production from Exile. Yes. I think when people like Give Me Flowers, it's gonna be no different. Yes, they're gonna notice how great the production is on this album, but Blue is still rapping great on here in my opinion. I think he bounces off of the great beats that Exile has.
No, I think that is a major draw into them as a duo. Because Exile's production on here has some of the most interesting sample flips like that I've heard of the past decade. Because Good Morning Neighbor to take Mr. Rogers' flip and make it sound like it was meant to be always on a hip hop track is pretty impressive. And even
Aretha Franklin, I think it's sampled on Oh Heaven, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Sent from Heaven as well. There's a Sent from Heaven sample was pretty ridiculous as well. It's pretty...
I love Sent for Heaven. I love albums that end with instrumentals.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Black on Both Sides with May December, Mos Def ending with just the beat.
Yes.
So anytime you can end an album with a beautiful beat like that, I give him props for it.
Definitely. Because it's like... Because even like I said with A Letter, it was interesting to start off the whole project with just like no words. Just straight instrumental. But it felt welcoming and it felt like, oh, I'm about to get into... This is what I came for. Everything is still status quo quality production on Exile's, and now it's just kind of like, what's up with Blue?
That's why it's not a Blue album. It's a Blue and Exile album. He's just as much of what makes the album great as Blue is.
That's very true. Because it's funny because this could even be seen as almost like an indicator of going forward. Blue would continue to rap and continue to do what Blue does. But when it comes to production with the lo-fi sounds and some stuff, it kind of clashes with some of his styles, the stylistic choices, and some of his, and kind of muddles his, like, how his raps come across.
Yeah.
But when partnered with the right production, he is amongst some of the best in the game, easy, like sounding wise. With his music. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's had as much shine with the album release as since this album came out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Good to Be Home
is like the only closest thing.
Yeah, and even that was when people kind of started losing some of his fan base, I think, because that's when he really dedicated to the low, even though you and I love that album, but a lot of people really weren't feeling the lo-fi sound with it. People love blues music with Exile more than anything else, and I'm a huge Blue fan. I'm not representative of that because I listened to all of his work, right?
Right.
But to me, it's clear why his two most popular albums are his ones with Exile, right?
Yeah.
People love the sound that they love the chemistry, they love the sound, and even his rapping, they love it the most when it's with Exile.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's almost like how people associated Old Future and DJ Esco.
As far as like a rapper producer pairing?
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, it's like, it's like, if I hear Future with DJ Esco, I'm like, okay, it's going to be fire. Like, okay, this is going to be pretty dope. Or like, it's like, because it seems like it's something that they're at home with. Like, or even like a Common and Kanye, or a Jay-Z and Kanye beat. It's like, I'm going to get something.
Common and No ID.
Yeah. Jay Dilla. It's like,
yeah.
I'm gonna get something really good. I'm like, this is because the artists tend to have a great chemistry that you just can't really find elsewhere.
So we made it clear that people don't view the rest of Blue's discography the way they view his Blue and Exile. But why do you think even this album, in the years since then, I feel like it doesn't get appreciated as much as it should? Why do people still talk about Below the Heavens, but they don't talk about this album the same way? And I guess I should start. Do you hold this album in that high of regards?
As Below the Heavens?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think Below the Heavens is still better because one of my main, I guess, I wouldn't say gripes with Blue and Exile on this project, but I would say, comparatively speaking, Below the Heavens conceptually it was more succinct and more kind of tied together.
It had more of a concept throughout.
Yeah, throughout the project that this album didn't have. And Blue, because even though Blue is a fantastic rapper, like a popular theme amongst them from the man that gave you Below the Heavens is religion.
Yeah, and that's huge on this album too, just in a different way.
Yes, and he kind of flirts with the idea of like falling out of it, and also still trying to maintain or even going deeper into it. He flirts with it throughout the songs because he makes a bunch of references on like maybe one day, or even because even though he's starting about a girl, but then he talks about his life and falling. He said maybe I'll make it to heaven, maybe I'll do this, and then more out of life. And it's like he talks and like he touches that the idea of it, but then the only song that he truly kind of focuses in on a singular idea is, in my opinion, is like A Man.
Yeah,
because then he kind of bears it all about his religious view and where he personally stands with it. So I think if and in between these gaps, Blue he raps like how he raps the same caliber as usual. It's more sporadic in concept, and it's still introspective. It's just it's not like this is an overarching. It's not as upfront of an overarching tale that's being told, or like even theme is kind of more hinted at, or just it's almost like playing with your food. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna eat this. Yeah, I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna get to it sometime. And that's why I feel like what Blue did, and that kind of puts it a little lower for me than Below the Heavens.
So lyrically, we keep mentioning how production is so great on here, and that Blue really isn't this master lyricist. And I mean, I do mean that, but like you said, he is a pretty strong lyricist on this album, just in his own unique way. But I think what might make it hard is like the only way to truly appreciate a lot of the lyricism on here, a lot of the themes on here, is by knowing Blue's career before this, right? Like, yeah. I think, and in that sense, I almost kind of view this album as a sequel to Below the Heavens, because listening to Below the Heavens helps me appreciate the lyrics on here about growing up, about religion, about wanting a family one day. Even like, I mean, he references smoking weed on like every song on here. Like the dude's clearly changed, but I think I wouldn't recommend this to be the first album to listen to. And maybe that's why I think Below the Heavens gets more shine, is because even I would recommend, hey, listen to Below the Heavens before you listen to Give Me Flowers. Even though I kind of hold them even to each other, I think to truly appreciate this album, it's not like a standalone. I think you gotta have an appreciation for Blue and his lyrics before you're listening to this to truly get it.
Yeah, because this could be a bit of a. It could be a bit of a jump for someone, like, because you'll be, oh, he's spitting, he's raw, but then you're kind of like, is this how he always is? Is this really? It makes you question, like, all right, is this slurring? Is this kind of the switch up of flow? Is he always this animated when he raps, or is he this subdued at times? Because Blue is often subdued kind of on this project. Yeah, like on even like Mask Your Soul, like it's a pretty laid back approach to rap, and even in his more animated moments, it's still always kind of like this sense of calm and kind of like just really laid back. Like, yeah, I'm rapping. Yeah, I'm doing. I got it.
He's chill for sure.
He's chill as hell. So it's interesting. It could raise a lot of questions, and you kind of leave more questions than answers. If you come from Below the Heavens, like you said, it's like, oh, yeah, all right, he just kind of adapted this even further, or even this isn't just like a one-off thing. He is this rapper. He is this lyricist that I could actually appreciate and kind of expect more of.
Definitely. You want to get into favorite songs?
Yeah, you go first this time.
Yeah, I'll go first this time. So we mentioned religion as a big theme, and you said The Man, or A Man. That's like the biggest religious song on here, but I think one that I like even more is The Only One. Because he doesn't just talk about religion, he just talks in general how he's changing. Like you said, religion is a big thing on here. So he mentions but religion, he straight up says, but religion isn't in me anymore. Right. It's like, I remember when I first heard that took me by surprise, because I'm like, this is Blue, right? This dude literally had an album called Jesus that came out a little bit after Below the Heavens came out. Like, what, is he really saying that? He talks about wanting to quit smoking weed, and you hear that and you're like, okay, but you talk about smoking weed every 30 seconds on this album. And then one line that really stuck with me was, I used to give bums change till I changed. Kind of strange, because I am richer than I was when I gave. And I kind of noticed that with a lot of people as they grow up. They become stingier with their money. Maybe it's become more family men and they're looking after their own, stuff like that.
Right.
He talks about not hanging out with his friends anymore. He talks about wanting to start a family. And I know this is around the time he had a daughter, I think, because I remember in the song Alone with Lorraine, that came out this year. So I'm not really sure when he had his kid, but it might have been before this album came out. So I always really like The Only One, because it's not just that religious theme, but in general, he's talking about how much he's grown up and how he's changed since Below the Heavens. Another one of my favorites is Maybe One Day. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. I love the beat on it. I love the chorus. It's just a really pretty sounding song. I mean, it's not just the beat though and the chorus that carries it. Like, it's one of Blue's best songs rapping wise, I think, on the whole album. I really love the line where he says, I'm like the kid with the chipped tooth split with Bishop and Juice, which is referring to Young Nas with the chipped front tooth, and then of course Tupac is Bishop and Juice.
Don Juan Bishop now flipping the truth.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best bar he has on the whole album, right?
Yes, that was definitely the first standout bar. Well, not the first stand, but that was like the one that stuck with me the longest, because that going from Bishop and Juice to the Don Juan Bishop, I'm flipping the truth, pimping. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, he goes off ridiculous. In that song. I love how he starts off the second verse when he's like, spark something up, top the hunger, reflect when I was young and didn't have to spark nothing up. I wonder what it was that had me puffing blunts, coughing up my blood and guts just for a fucking buzz. I love that line.
Yeah, I also love, and it's interesting on this, because spoiler alert, this is one of my favorites. Yeah. And it's interesting because we were talking about like his flow switching up on the like, and how he kind of is really good at complimenting these Exile beats. Yeah, like this song is like one of the go-to examples for me. Like, oh, you want to hear what a Blue Exile song should sound like? This is it.
Especially because this is probably the least heard album we have on our top 20, maybe, as far as popularity wise. Yeah. So if there's anyone out here who hasn't heard this, like, I would say listen to Maybe One Day first. Yeah,
I would definitely have that as my first.
My last favorite song, I had Growing Pains, the one with Fashawn and Exile rapping on it too. I love the beat. I love Blue's verse. I love Fashawn's chorus. It's just, I don't know, that used to be my favorite song on here. I think Maybe One Day probably is my favorite now. I just really like the beat. It's just a really happy song, and it's just four guys reminiscing. It's one of my favorites. What about you?
All right, my favorites, as I said, Maybe One Day.
Yeah.
Another one that I really like is I Am John.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I first heard this track, it was kind of like, especially with the title, like I Am John, it's kind of like, whoa. What is like?
I never got the title because he spells John like Gene.
Yeah.
Yeah, his name is Johnson. Like, clearly he's referencing the fact that his name is Johnson Barnes, right? Yeah. So I don't. Yeah, but he's John.
Because he mentions also like him being part French and when John.
He mentions that on The Only One. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you see on in French is like spelled like that.
Yeah.
So it's
like, oh, that's why you think he spelled it like that.
I got you. John, because he's referencing his French.
Yeah.
Because if but also John, if you watch Attack on Titan, anyone out there, there's a character that for the longest time when I was reading it, I was like, oh, it's Gene. And then the first time I ever hear the English, like, Jean, I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, so we're going European. Gotcha. But I really love some of the bars on here were really like Garden of Egypt, now river flow, searching for the eighth wonder, underwater dance cooler than ice, pick a beat, rip to the right, ripper. It's like the way he was flowing. I'm like, okay, you know what?
He holds his own on the rapping.
He
sure.
really does, and it was really interesting to hear. And I love the beat on here as well. It was very Exile did his thing, and it samples actually award tour by Tribe Called Quest actually. Yeah, and when I heard the song, I'm like, is that? And I love that song.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to hear Blue over a song inspired. Because honestly, if you have an artist that I could see collaborating or being on like that type of time musically, would be Blue, like similar to like a Tribe Called Quest or even like a Far Side or
Big Blue Planets.
Yes.
Okay, is that who you're thinking of?
They don't say even Black Star as well, but
okay,
you know. But yeah, it was interesting to hear Blue on a song like that.
Yeah,
so I was pleasantly surprised with that. And then my third favorite track by Blue off this project, Blue and Exile on this project. It's a toss up. I like a man. I like a man because as we spoke about, it's like him kind of just burying things.
Some powerful lyrics about religion.
Yeah. But I also really like Oh Heaven.
Yeah. I think Oh Heaven might be my favorite beat on the whole album.
Yeah, is that either Oh Heaven or More Out Life because that sample and that when you talk about people going to Blue and Exile for beautiful sounding tracks, like those two songs are kind of what I think about whenever I'm like, oh yes. Besides tracks from Below the Heaven, it's like if I'm gonna think about this album, those songs, because Blue was giving all the lyrical content that I could have asked for, as well as Exile's beats really coming through in a strong but clear and crisp manner that was refreshing to hear, especially for someone that listened to older Blue, those in between projects, and also now coming back to this project for making this list after listening to like Good Be Home. It's interesting. It's refreshing to hear Blue on something kind of crisper.
Yeah,
it's nostalgic. Honestly,
when this came out, there was no new Blue sound that you and I like. When we talk about new Blue, we know what that means. But at the time that this came out, this was who he was, and it's great. Any last thoughts to wrap it up?
Honestly, I would just want to say I recommend this project to anyone that like hasn't listened to it yet.
Definitely.
And I really think that Below the Heavens, if you enjoyed that, it has a worthy successor in Give Me Flowers, and I do recommend all three of these projects that we talked about today, honestly, for all of our audience. Like, if you haven't listened to them in a long time, or you never listened to them at all, go check them out.
Yeah, give them a re-listen even if you have heard it and it's been 5 years since you have heard it.
Yeah, at the very
your appreciation can change for these things.
Very much so. Very much.
All right, does that do it for this episode?
I think so, my guy.
All right, see you guys next time.
Yep.